We're going to get started. Let's have somebody pray as we start the session this morning. Yeah, pray.
Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you again for this time that we can gather again to look into your word. Thank you for our opportunity to worship you freely, Lord. Pray that you be with God. Speak to him, Lord. Help us to know more about you. Help us to find our lives. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. So, all right, this is the last of the 7 deadly sins. We are going to have some interesting time next week as well related to this, but I'll keep that a secret. So just to begin with, I know we covered a lot of material. It's all up on the internet. Thank you, Nam, for recording it, and we've been putting it up. Let me recap it real quick, because I know it's a lot of information to process. The 7 different sins of this series is this ministry burnout, doctrinal dilution, loss of evangelistic passion, biblical illiteracy, lack of dependence on the Holy Spirit, and then lack of prayer was one we covered last week. And then this week is lack of impact on our neighborhood. And we're actually going to, this one I actually combined a bunch of different ones. So we're going to break it down to 4 different areas. Failure to be relevant to our neighborhood, few outwardly focused ministries, conflict over personal preferences, and finally, the priority of comfort. So as you see, we have a lot to cover today, but I think that we can do it. As always, this depends on your input, how well the class is running. Can I get somebody to actually take the mouse off of the board over there? Just run the mouse off to the side. Yeah, perfect. Thank you. All right, so today the first thing we're gonna talk about is actually failure to be relevant. Let me read the scripture real quick. Jesus said, Matthew 5:14, "You are the light of the world. A city situated on the hill cannot be hidden. No one lights a lamp and puts it under a basket, but rather on a lampstand, and gives light for all who are in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before men, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven." So Jesus gives us an example of being a city on a hill and I want to say, being relevant to the neighborhood that you're in. So what exactly does relevant mean? This is actually interesting. I looked it up. Webster's Merriam Dictionary says, having significant or demonstrable bearing on the matter at hand. So what does that mean? Well, we looked into the origin of relevant and blah, blah, blah in Latin, but basically it means to raise up. So that's interesting. Are we relevant to our neighborhood? Do we raise up our neighborhood as a church? So, how about this? Let's dive into some questions. Still under failure to be relevant. What are some ways that our church is currently relevant to our neighborhood? What do you guys think? Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, way back there. Yes. Okay.
There's the after-school program. There's also the VBS during the summertime.
Nice.
You know, we have fellowships during the week.
Okay.
The Bible studies.
All right. So let me repeat that in case the camera didn't pick it up. We have after-school program, VBS. We have fellowships throughout the week. What are some other ways that we are relevant to our neighborhood?
Yes. Sports ministry on Sunday.
Yes, sports ministries. Okay, maybe one more, and then we have a lot to cover today. Some ways that we're relevant as a church to our neighborhood.
Ministry classes.
Ministry classes?
English.
Oh, English classes. Yes, yes, we do that. Actually, I put together my own list, and it's pretty much what you guys said. After school program, VBS, basketball programs. Don't forget volleyball programs. We have those. We have immigration services. We have the fellowships that you guys mentioned. We also have prayer. I mean, we pray for our neighborhood. We have counseling services. There have been people who come in, and we have counseling. If they can make it to the 5th floor, we do counseling. And then what we have done. So All right, so what are some ways that our church can become more relevant to our neighborhood? This is where we brainstorm. What are some ways that we could become more relevant to our neighborhood? That we could lift up our neighborhood? Okay. All right. Let me help you guys. So, all right. I had the strongest coffee in the room, so I'm awake. So all right. So just some ideas. Free income tax services. My old church did this. It was a huge ministry. I mean, we had to limit how many people we signed them up. We had one tax person in the church, an accountant, and she trained everybody else on one Saturday how to do TurboTax. And then for the next 6 weeks, every Saturday, our fellowship center was full the entire day. And the pastors came, and some of the deacons and some leaders in the church, and we shared the gospel. Free income tax services. The donation center, I know a lot of churches do this. You can drop off clothes, you can help donate clothes. And these are just ideas. This doesn't mean we have to do these, but these are some ways that we can become even more relevant. Teaching Chinese. I've mentioned this a couple times. I cannot do this, okay? Well, yeah, Ben Chili. That's about all I know, right? But we can teach Chinese. I would actually take those classes. Benevolence fund to help not only members in our church, but what about opening that up to the neighborhood? This is an interesting one. I think it's a new concept, but my mother's church does this back in Georgia. They actually have small business funds to help people in the community and in the church start up small businesses. I don't know the logistics. I could figure it out. I mean, I could ask the pastors, which I know, but small business help. PS1 involvement. I saw an email floating around the other day for they need translators. Is it PS1 or PS2, one of those? But we could help paint at PS1. Last week, I believe, we helped move tables after service with the Teachers Association, parent teachers. So PS1 involvement, we could get involved. I know the City Serve, the thing that Louis Palau helped organize, all of the pastors are getting together for PS2, I believe, and giving away Christmas presents. So, yeah, we can get involved in our local schools. Homeless outreach, and this is another one too that a lot of churches are doing in Manhattan, supporting the art world. Whether that be hip hop, or that be actually artistic studios. We could have songwriting competitions. We could have painting competitions. Advertise around, have prizes. Have the kids come and present all of their art. We have judges and things. So just some ideas. We don't have to do all those, but so along that line, what are the needs of our neighborhood? What do you guys think? Oh, sorry. What are the needs of our neighborhood? Childcare. Yes. Now, when you say childcare, do you mean after-school programs? What do you mean exactly by after-school? After-school. Okay. Yeah, I have run into several families on the street, and they were, especially toward the beginning of the school year, and they were confusing our church with another church, but they were looking for childcare. And they had a bunch of little kids, and then they actually got frustrated because they couldn't figure out which church it was. I know this is a need. We don't currently have, we have an after-school program, and so, yeah, childcare.
Understanding Medicare and Medicaid for
Oh, yes.
the Chinese-speaking that don't understand English, they don't understand how to go to doctors. I think translation is like a great need.
Yeah, yes. That's a whole, a huge need, not only translation, but medical needs in your neighborhood. Let's see, something we did, my old church, I just remembered, we actually had a bone marrow You know, you can have bone marrow, you can sign up to be a bone marrow donor. Well, we had nurses come to our church and they swabbed. That's all they did. They swabbed, and they wrote your name and registered you as a bone marrow donor. And very simple. We just asked nurses to come from a local hospital. What are some other needs of our neighborhood? Yes.
And this might be obvious, at least to me as a church, but I think there's a spiritual darkness in the neighborhood, that the parents don't teach the kids about things at all. I mean, if you don't, not learn the topics that they seem to be taught growing up. There's no awareness at all.
That's good. Spiritual awareness. What others? Yeah.
I think it's like along the same lines, like what Ishan was saying, like a lot of the, like the housing, paperwork and stuff that people don't understand, like providing services like that, where you can help them like with those sort of like details and stuff.
Yeah, housing. Okay, so maybe anybody else have any others? I don't want to cut anybody off. So here's a follow-up question. Are we meeting those needs? And are we even the ones who should meet those needs? At what point does the government meet certain needs, and what point does the church meet certain needs? Just something to think about. It's more of a rhetorical question, but we can identify the needs of our neighborhood and see, are we meeting those needs, and see if they're already being met, or if there's a better way. Maybe we could even help facilitate, help the government facilitate certain things, and that's a whole nother path. So along the roads of being, we could spend all day on this, by the way, but so that we get through all of these. Another question about being relevant, and this came from one of the books I'm going to show in just a minute, but so it's not my question, don't get offended, but what decade is our church in? So, and along that, our music, our dress code. I still remember an older lady in the Cantonese congregation in my old church getting on to one of the younger ladies in the English congregation and had a big talk with her, like, what are you wearing, you know, and I guess it was too revealing for her, but so how was our dress code? I think I mentioned this, there was a church in San Francisco that I called a Men in Black church because their greeters were men with some suits and they always wore sunglasses because it was a sunny street. But it looked so intimidating to me. I was like, wow, like maybe that attracted that type of people though. I mean, but I don't know, is that relevant to our neighborhood? Decoration. Just little things like bulletin, technology. What decade are we in technology? We're still working on an updated website. So if anybody has web development, I would love some help. And we're working on some signs to let people know that we're in PS1. All of those are in the works, but I do need help with that. So, the website, advertisements. And you can go overboard with this. I've seen. There's this one church in the city, I won't point them out, but I've seen buses pass by with a big billboard for this church. So you can put them on taxi cabs, but you know, what decade are we in? How about this? Does our church address current cultural issues? San Francisco, homosexuality is a big one. I had to sit down and have a talk, and they may not have agreed with me, but the high schoolers, what was their view on homosexuality? Because political correctness is actually entering the church, and how does that mesh with the gospel, with the scripture? So are we addressing these needs in our neighborhood? Pluralism, some people think all roads go to God, things like that. Inequality. I was given a flyer today. This guy this week gave me a flyer protesting the new developments and the rezoning of Chinatown in the Lower East Side. So are we addressing this? Along those lines, politics? Are we discussing this? How can we make an impact in politics? I have given a sermon on choosing the right candidate. As a church, we're not allowed to say which candidate to choose, but we can give you scriptural knowledge about what characteristics should you look in any candidate. Drugs, medical marijuana was an issue in San Francisco. Hopefully it's not here, right? Education. This is a huge one in our church, the Chinese church. I mean, at what point, where does education fall with reaching our neighborhood, with your own kids, with their walk with Christ? Is there a balance? These are all huge questions that we can't answer. But there's some others. Are there any other cultural issues that our church should address? By the way, if anybody wants teaching on any of these, just talk to me. We can come up with the teaching. We can find a place to do it, a time slot. But I have done a lot of teachings on homosexuality, and I call in an expert who has her own ministry on that, and I've Skyped her in before, where she's actually taught by Skype. But any of these we could talk about. Okay, so let's close that one up. Failure to be relevant. Tom Rainer, and I'm going to talk about his book. He says that failure to be true to doctrines of the Christian faith leads to apostasy, but failure to understand the world in which we live and serve leads to irrelevancy. That was a good quote. So how about this? Failure to reach your neighborhood. The second one is few outwardly focused ministries. Paul says this. It says, how can they call on one whom they have not believed in? And how can they believe in one whom they have not heard? And how can they hear without somebody preaching to them? And how can anyone preach unless they are sent? As it is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who bring the good news. And so, is our church outwardly focused? How are our ministries? Rainer, and I only quote him because he's done a lot of research. One of the books, he analyzed 14 churches that had died. They were over with. They'd already closed the doors, sold their buildings. And he analyzed them, talked to the deacons and members, that looked at everything about that. Not only that, but he sent out surveys to thousands of churches and asked them all of these questions. So he came up with this, and he said in one of these recent surveys, he found that 95% of churches, nearly 95, these churches' ministries were for members alone. And many of those had zero ministries for outside of their congregation. And he says that this is a sign that points to the decline and even the church is dying, which could happen. So keep that in mind. I came up with some questions about fewer not having so many outwardly focused ministries. The first one is maybe the most obvious. If our church were to die or leave or up and move the community, will the community even notice? What do you guys think? Somebody answer this.
So you can also bring it down to the individual level.
Okay.
If I were to die today,
Okay.
would anyone notice?
Yeah. Yeah. Nice. Maybe let's keep that rhetorical. I don't want to put anybody on the spot, and it's recorded. Okay, so nobody. But okay, it's a good thought. One of the things, and I have this at the very end of this, some action steps. So one of them is go and take community surveys, right? So in that survey, I want to ask them, do they know who we are? And I'm just going to go store by store. I might need a translator. Place by place, building by building. I'm going to ask them, do you know who Chinese Evangel Mission Church is? And see if they even know us on this block, or the block over. And so yeah, will they even notice if we're here or if we're going? How about this? How is our church budget allocated to outwardly focused ministries? We could do a breakdown, like a pie chart. We could do a pie chart. Are your members and leadership open to outwardly focused ministries? Yes, we are. And I think that we do have a huge outwardly focused, that's one of the things that drew me to this church. And I love that about our church. I think that we're very healthy in this, I just say. But that doesn't mean that we need to stop. We need to be comfortable. I want to continually challenge us. And then finally, what percentage of our ministries are outwardly focused? So that was kind of a short one, but we do need to cover it. Maybe in 20 years we'll come back and watch this video and say like, hey, like what happened? And then we can reanalyze ourselves. Just to cover our bases. The next one, and about having a community impact, is conflict over personal preferences. I put this verse, Paul said, for the Jews ask for a sign, and the Greeks seek wisdom, but we preach Christ crucified, a stumbling block to the Jews and foolishness to the Gentiles. And the reason I put that, one time I was on the train, and there was a guy from another denomination, and man, all that he kept preaching was about the seventh day. It's like every church, blah blah blah, they doesn't go seventh day. And I was for like 30 minutes, and I was like, let me tell you what I preach. I preach Christ and Christ crucified. Like you're all into this one thing, but I think that we as a church can get caught up sometimes in different preferences and different things. But Paul just brings it back and says, I preach Christ and Christ crucified, and that shows with his ministry. So how about this? What are some personal preferences that churches squabble over? Yeah.
Infant baptism versus, belief baptism when you become a
Okay.
believer.
Yeah. Yeah, baptism could be one. Personal preferences.
Music, what kind of music?
Yes.
What much?
Yes, I have a friend back in Georgia that left my old church because of, he said the music was too loud. And he left, yeah.
What Bible version to use,
Yeah,
what color the walls of the church should be.
yeah. And that's serious. The Bible version that colored the wall. I know a church, I won't say which church, but they had somebody lovingly volunteer to paint the church, right? The sanctuary. Well, everybody showed up the next Sunday, and nobody liked it, and it really insulted the guy, hurt his feelings, they didn't handle it well, and he left the church. Over painting the church, over serving, and not necessary to squabble like that. It happened. Pulpit. My old church, we had a huge wooden pulpit. That's great, right? But I wasn't comfortable with that, so I got a few of the strong guys, and they would move the pulpit for the English service and put this a good music stand, and then they would move it back. So, but churches in Tom Rader's book, I'll just show it. It's called Autopsy of a Deceased Church. He analyzes these 14 churches, and one of them got into a huge argument over the pulpit. I mean, like, we need to preach Christ and Christ crucified, not what type of pulpit, right? Let me give, for a second time, a couple of you mentioned these. Worship style, buildings, rooms, carpeted or not, what type of carpet, water fountains. I've heard conflicts over that. Conflict over church staff, that's probably one of the most common ones. So here's some questions. Have there been any conflicts in our church over the past years, past 5 years, 5-10 years? Nobody wants to stay on camera. All right, after camera. I had to do that.
Public church.
No, okay. All right, well, how about this? You come tell me that first, right? All right, so I forgot to put the question up, but have there been personal? The second is, most importantly, have they been resolved, and how did it affect our church? Yes or no, or are we a perfect church? All right, I heard something, so like, okay.
I don't know if it's conflict, but sometimes it's like in the Bible, the Greek Jews felt that they were being overlooked.
Yes? Yeah.
And so I think that there's different demographics even within the church. Like you have the elderly, and then you have teenagers or preteens, and sometimes maybe because we, I guess, have a small staff and people have different sensitivities or strengths to ministering to certain groups of people. Maybe certain groups might feel like they're being overlooked. You know?
Yeah.
And so, I don't know if that's a conflict, but maybe certain people might have left the church because they felt like they were overlooked.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Thanks for sharing.
I think sometimes conflicts are good to the church.
Okay, that's another, yeah, but elaborate on that.
It could, like for instance, when there was conflict between Paul and one of the disciples, it turned out that they split and they went each their own way in certain ministries, and it was a positive thing because the gospel was passed on to different areas where it didn't have been processed.
Yeah, okay, that's a good point. Conflict is not always bad. Now, the way that you handle conflict is a different story. Yeah, I mean, I could tell, dozens and dozens of stories. One book I read scared me to death. It's called The Devil in Pew 4 or something. It was about this guy in the church that tricked this lady to think somebody is cheating, the pastor is cheating on his wife, and the guy ended up killing the pastor. And this is a real story, and then he went on Dr. Phil like 20 years later when he's released from prison. And there's conflict, and there's squabble, and there's these things that happen. They really happen in the church. I've heard so many stories personally. Again, this is just a checklist to make sure that we're healthy as a church. So I'm sure we could spend a lot more time on that. But the most important question is, have these been resolved? Did we grow from it? Did we learn from it? Are we going to repeat it again? Questions like that. And that has to do with forgiveness. I keep hearing people say, let's do some teaching on forgiveness. So we can do that. So just real quick, show and tell. I mentioned Autopsy of a Deceased Church by Tom Rainer. He also wrote a couple of other books, Vibrant Church, and he does a lot of, he gives a lot of information from the surveys that he did for churches. This one right here is called Transformational Church by Tom Rainer. I actually went through this with my own church. So it's just very many chapters, and we did it in a teaching setting similar to this. This is written by my professor. It's called The Case for Antioch, Dr. Orge. In here he compares modern churches to the church in Antioch and see how they compare, how they measure up. Present Future by Reggie McNeil. 6 tough questions for the church. Again, if you guys want to look at these, you can. Center Church, I think it's like a year and a half I went through this with Tim Keller. It was like once a month to begin with, and he teaches all of his teachings that he's learned for the church in New York City. So it's very relevant to our church, an excellent book. I'm not going to do all of these. What is a healthy church member? That's good. On another topic, the hole in the gospel. This guy covers, it's by Richard Stearns. He covers what we're lacking as a gospel. Sometimes we can get caught up in buildings and teachings, and these are good things, but sometimes we forget what Christ has called us to do. Right? What is a healthy church? How to transform a city? Extreme church make. Anyways, I just want to show that there's a lot of books out there, and most of these guys all of them are real scenarios. They've taken a lot of surveys, and so we can compile that knowledge, and we can go deeper into this. So, just flying to that. The last one is called, I'm going to call it Priority of Comfort. So, as far as not having an impact in our neighborhood, Paul again says, I have become all things to all people, so that by all possible means I might save some. I do all of this for the sake of the gospel, that I may share in its blessing. So, Rainer, again, he says, many churches are in definite patterns of decline because church members simply will not move beyond the couches of comfort. It's much easier to do things the way we've always done them, rather than get uncomfortable in the world outside the walls of the church. And so with that, I put together some questions to help us evaluate our own. When was the last time our churches tried something challenging to be a city on a hill the way that Jesus called us to be? Yes.
Monroe Street Festival.
Yeah.
I don't think we ever did that to that scale.
Yeah, Monroe Street, and that was a huge kill. I mean, we organized so many churches working together, got all of the city paperwork done, the advertisements, the not to mention the manpower and the prayer, and that was an amazing feat. Yeah, what are some? Are there any others that we've done that challenged us? Yes.
Last year, we've done Operation Christmas Child for the past,
Yeah.
few years. And then last year, we tried to do, Angel Tree,
Uh-huh.
have you heard of?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I've done it.
So, but I think that, we submitted our application a little bit too late, so we did we mailed away the gifts to the, children of the prisoners instead. But this year, we do have, so just to, let you know, we, I registered our church again this year, and this year they did come up with some local, addresses.
Mhm.
So what it is that, the church, meaning us, we deliver gifts to the homes of these, families of prisoners on behalf of the prisoners, and we share the gospel of Jesus Christ with them. So this year, I wanted to talk to you about that.
Yeah.
So we're looking forward to something like that. Within our neighborhood, we have like 6 households that, I got names for.
That's awesome.
We're starting on a smaller scale, and so.
Yeah.
it's something that, I'm looking forward to, and hope that a lot of the members of our church can partner with us in this endeavor.
Mhm. Yeah, great plug. Yeah, nice. Let's do that. I love it. Yeah, and I kind of a lot of ideas about that. So, and I've done, I think it's called his and her toy box, and we actually the thing was they instead of people bringing presents, we actually created a gift registry on Amazon, and then people bought that was sent to the church. So I got a lot of ideas about that. So yeah, that's good. And definitely going into people's houses is a challenge, and getting outside of the church walls. So let's see. Just moving on for sake of time. Kind of a rhetorical question, but do you think Jesus called the church to be comfortable or to be active? This one, looking at the New Testament church, I would say the latter. Or how about this? This is a good one, and this goes along the lines with that guy passing out the flyers about the protest, the demographics and such. Are there any socioeconomic, age, or ethnic changes in our neighborhood that our church needs to consider? Or to put it another way, is Chinatown and the Lower East Side the same as it was 20 years ago? It's not. I see people shaking their heads. And maybe the question that's more relevant for us today is it going to be the same in 10 or 15 years? So we need to consider that. We can't address that right this second, but again, this is something we need to look into. Are there areas in our church that we're resisting because of preferences? It's more a rhetorical question. How does our church compare to 10 or 20 years ago? And along the lines with that, are there any patterns of decline or stagnation or growth over the past 20 years? And again, this has to do with analyzing our church. So, with that, let me do this real quick. The closing remark, and this is from Rainer's, his surveys, and he says, he believes that out of the churches in America, 10% are healthy, 40% have symptoms of sickness, 40% are very sick, and 10% are dying. If our church was given an examination today, which category would we fall into? So let me hear back from you guys. Of those 4 categories, and there may be another category, it might be in between or something, but where would we as a church stand? And this is where it gets real. By the way, if you deny that stuff is happening in a church, then you're never going to address it. And wait, I should have done one of those phone polls where it's like anonymous, right? Anybody want to speak on this? I don't want to put anybody on the spot.
I'm the second category.
Okay. By the way, we should do maybe this is too vague because we should actually see what is a healthy church, right? I mean, that's kind of a big, I mean, it's relative. A healthy church in Chinatown could be different than a healthy church in California. So yeah, it is, but maybe leaving it rhetorical that it's something we need to do, and maybe as a board we'll sit down and go through every single ministry, every single budget, every single whatever is happening at the church, and see where we're at and see where we can, because we don't want to deny it, we don't want to stay in a rut, and we definitely don't want to go on a decline. So there are patterns from all of these books and personal experience, and you guys have personal experience. There's a way to know if your church is heading towards closing. I don't think our church is, but we do need to pay attention.
Just had a
Yes.
Is it feasible to have like external service to come in and interview? Because sometimes when we're sick, we don't know we're sick, right?
Yeah, that's a good point, and I have done that. The previous denomination that I was with, they actually had a specialist who came in, interviewed the pastors, interviewed all the deacons. He showed up a couple times, analyzed the ministries, then he wrote us a report. So there are services, because we're not part of a denomination, we're non-denominational, we could hire somebody, a specialist. So I could research it, yeah.
Do you think living away from the community within a 10-mile radius, I guess, impact on our commuters? Or should we all move back to Chinatown?
Yeah. I think that if we prioritize the gospel, the Great Commission, that we can be commuters and still have an impact in this neighborhood. The question is, do we do it? And that is, I would say, somebody asked me the other day, he said, tell me the drama about your church. I was like, I don't really know of any drama. I think it's a good church, it's a healthy church. He says, well, tell me the number one issue with your church. And I told him, and this is my evaluation, and I think that our biggest issue is that we're primarily commuter church, and with that comes a lot of different difficulties. So my heart would be to start to increase, maybe have an equal amount of people who live within a few block radius and commuters. So keep all the commuters, okay, great, but increase the amount. And we're actually, whether we know it or not, we actually are helping ourselves doing that by getting Monroe, which is right across the street from Knickerbocker. We can do this, but we need to know, actually I'm going to talk about that, but we need to have a vision to do that. And so with that, because of time, our action steps are that what can we do to become a healthy church, to address these issues that we have? Pray, okay? And I'm not just saying pray, but we're going to have to develop a strategy to pray. Sometimes you got to. I was just talking to somebody about, let's start with a once a month prayer meeting after service. We got to pray, guys. I mean, nothing's going to happen. In fact, bad things are going to happen if we don't pray. So we're going to have to just do it. It's going to take time. I went to a conference yesterday at Calvary Baptist. It was a conference about witnessing to Muslims. Amazing. There were 400 people there. It just blew my mind. But for 45 minutes, we had a prayer session. And so I'm just sitting there, all of us were, and we're just, to be honest, it's hard to sit there for 45 minutes and pray. But after about 15 minutes, I was like, this is awesome. We have people from all different nations. We're all praying for 45 minutes. So it is difficult, but I guarantee once you get into the habit of doing it, it's going to be amazing. Can't talk enough about prayer. Take community surveys. I'm going to put those together just because I'm trying to do a lot of other things. I haven't had a chance, but I don't want to just say, do you know our church? I actually want to have a whole list of questions. Not too many to take too much, but a list of questions of, would you be interested in coming to church? You know, have some material I could give to them as a lead. Is there anything that we as a church can help you with? Things like that. So, community surveys work. Clean the church, room by room. I started to take photos of like different issues. Then I stopped, and then I think that we all know that there's some things that we can clean up. And we're doing it. The fourth floor, we're working on that. Some of them can be touchy, but I really appreciate everybody who's painted my office, mine and Pastor Dennis's office. People working on the fourth floor, redid the apartment. We're doing a lot, but there's still some things we can work on. Basically, the question is, if a visitor came in, what would they see? Create a vision for the next 10 years. This is what one of the things I want to work on January the 9th. We're going to have a board, a get-together. We're just going to, a church board. Going to create a vision. Neighborhood demographic surveys. Do we even know who's in our neighborhood anymore? You can get these. They cost a little bit. They cost a fee. But we could see what is our demographics of our neighborhood. How many Chinese are there? How many non-Chinese? How many Hispanics? What's the demographic, the income? What language do they speak? These are really important information to know. And with that, I would like to develop prayer maps. I already mentioned I'd like to start getting volunteers to show up Sundays and pray before service in our neighborhood. By the way, Dennis and I, we're setting an example this week. We went out and prayer walked, both of us. It was an amazing time. And God opened our eyes to some things. I went places I'd never gone before. That's part of prayer walking. God lets you know what's going on in your neighborhood. And not only that, but I prayed for these things. Ask the community what they need. Have a vision casting day for the church, and that goes along with having a vision. So, we plan to do these things. Some of these things are more leadership levels, and some things are things that you guys can do. And every one of these is something that we need to evaluate for ourselves. With that,
Pastor,
yes.
what is vision casting?
Yeah, that's when we actually have a vision as a church. So vision is like a purpose.
Yeah, I know what's a vision. I'm just wondering, casting.
Yeah, so casting has to do with casting a net out. But basically, for me, it would be sharing it in the sermons. Having, at one point I wrote up here, to fall in love with God, to be a city on the hill, and then to do the Great Commission. So that's my vision, and we're going to develop that in the next coming years. And then 2016, through sermons, through the website, just have it right there in the website. There's multiple ways to cast the vision. Sunday schools, pass out cards for people to keep in their pocket. Like, this is our vision. Are we doing this every week? Are we falling more in love with it? Are we being the city on the hill? Things like that. Are we loving, oh, sorry, the second one was loving ourselves and loving our neighbors. So being a family of God through the church. Are we doing those three things? Every pastor, every church is going to do vision casting differently, but let's see what fits our church the most. And then any closing comments before we pray? Okay, I know that's a lot, and we're going to talk a little bit more about it next week. Everything, actually, we talked about the past 7 different weeks, but let's have somebody pray, and we'll close this out.
Precious Lord, we just give you thanks where we were able to spend this 45 minutes just reevaluating ourselves, Lord. Father, we talked a lot about, a lot of things within here at CMC, and we just thank you for even allowing us to be a part of this neighborhood, Lord. Father, we talked about things where, it's an eye-opener for us, and Father, we lift those things up to you, and Father, we realize that nothing can be done without you, Lord. So Father, I ask that your Spirit continue to lead this church. I ask that your Holy Spirit guide us, be the light. And Father, we just thank you for the many bodies here at this church body and doing your great work, Lord. So Father, continue to be with us as the body of believers. It's this time to you. Precious Son, in the name of Jesus, we pray. Amen.